For weeks.
Way back in 2018 here on this channel, I reviewed TNA's Unbreakable pay-per-view from 2005, widely considered to be one of the greatest shows they ever did during this time period. And since as of late this month I've been kind of wading back in the waters of TNA, especially 2005, it's time to go back and see what the gang's been up to since Unbreakable took place. A lot's already changed in that time. Let's go to what's considered to be the biggest show of the year for TNA, Bound for Glory 2005. From October 23rd at the Impact Zone in Orlando, Florida. This show was nominated by Russell Pierce, Edward Economist, and Hunter Mainville over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. Now, more recently here on the channel, I looked at Slammiversary 2005, and what a difference just a few months makes here for TNA, because, you know, their Fox Sports Net deal, their TV deal, had just expired. Raven had just become the new NWA World Champion, winning the King of the Mountain match. Well, since that time, both of those things have changed. They have a new TV home at Spike TV. Just 5 days after Monday Night Raw left the network, TNA has sidled on in and thus began their relationship. Also, Raven is no longer the World Heavyweight Champion, even though he retained the belt against Rhino at Unbreakable. Here's what happened. A few days after Unbreakable happened, there was a house show in Ontario, Canada. America's Most Wanted interfered in a Ravens rules match to help Jeff Jarrett regain the belt. Good for those folks in Ontario, I suppose, but what a weird way for Raven's world title reign to come to an end. Now, the plan for this show going in was for Kevin Nash to challenge Jeff Jarrett for the world title in the main event. But the day of the show, Nash said he had a medical emergency and he could not compete on the show. It's been said that he thought he was having a minor heart attack. Kevin Nash has a history of heart disease and heart attacks in his family, so he freaked out, and so that's why he couldn't be on the show. That is the official word as of right now as to why he couldn't be on the show. But, you know, just taking into account that by his own admission recently, Nash said the reason he actually missed Starrcade 97 was because he had too many pop brownies. So who knows what the real story for this is. Kind of nice to see the voiceover guy actually visible in the opening package here. Boys will become men. Men will become wolves. I'm sorry, I meant warriors. And warriors will take great strides on their way to immortality. The theme music for the show immediately cuts off once we see the live crowd. It's the first of many technical errors we're going to see of some sort this evening. 900 folks in the Impact Zone, about 30,000 pay-per-view buys for this one. Mike Tenay and Don West are on the call as usual here, and your opening matchup is the result of the partnership TNA had with New Japan at this time. It is considered a dream match of sorts as Samoa Joe takes on Jushin Thunder Liger. The undefeated Joe getting a traditional Polynesian dance on his way to the ring. Love that. Jushin Liger, the ultimate opening match wrestler, and I mean that with the utmost respect, getting his iconic theme, a ton of streamers. We then see Simon Inoki, the president of New Japan at the time, at ringside. We get split chants from the crowd all match. Early on, Joe tries to nope Liger, but Jushin sees it coming, hits the dropkick and a big dive to the outside from the top, goes for another dive back in the ring, but Joe catches him. Tenay is still listing Liger's credentials all match, talks about his match with Brian Pillman on the first Nitro as he takes a snap power slam. Liger comes back, somehow has the strength to suplex Joe. We get a pair of those Shote palm strikes and Joe kicks out. Liger goes up top, but Joe kicks him the muscle buster, the coquina clutch, 3 drops of the hand later, and Joe remains undefeated. I'm going to give it 2 stars out of 5. You know, for a match that was pretty much hyped up as this big dream match, and also, in hindsight, considering the combined legend of these two wrestlers, it's disappointing that this match was kind of what it was. You know, I think I would have liked it to be a bit longer, you know, tell more of back and forth and a story here. I thought they were going to do something there with Liger kind of doing the hand dropping thing. It was just a long process. I thought I was going to go somewhere, ended up not doing that. I think that's my biggest nitpick about the match. It probably could have gone longer and just showcased more of what they could do with each other, but either way, it's still cool that it happened. We get a recap of FanFest from the day before, then we go to the crowd and see gut check winners John Bolin and Jamie Dauncey, who are sitting behind Simon Inoki and a young Dave Marquez. Tenay says on commentary, these two are going to train in the LA dojo from New Japan, and before you know it, we're going to see them on the TNA TNA roster. And yes, those two did get signed to TNA contracts. I think that Jamie, the lady here, I think she had more of a time on TNA than John Boland did. But these two did wrestle in the Indies after their training with TNA, but didn't make much of a splash in the grand scheme of things. Backstage, Simon Diamond tries to motivate his diamonds in the rough, David Young and Elix Skipper, as they are in a six-man action taking on Apolo, Sonny Siaki, and Shark Boy. Sonny Siaki, what is that man wearing? You can tell he's trying so hard to look like some version of The Rock here. The story here, as we saw a little bit with Unbreakable the previous month, is that Simon Diamond has recruited these two guys to try and take him under his wing because he sees them as these, diamonds in the rough, and he wants them to become better. This is a group that has lost a lot more than they have won at this point, though, so that's the big story with them going in. It starts out with Diamond and Shark Boy, who bites him. He, by God, bites him. In come Apollo and Skipper. Apollo hitting a lot of power moves. Simon distracts the ref. That allows Young and Skipper to take over. Skipper hitting Apollo in the stomach or hip area with the shoulder, kind of like a chop block, and the big man goes flying. Sonny Siaki is tagged in, and his elbow pads look so big and bright, I thought he was going to go wading in the pool later. Apollo with a big old cutter onto Young. Suddenly Skipper vaults off of two people, dives towards Siaki with a kick, a Rana attempt. Either way, the collision looks really rough, but I appreciate the attempt. David Young with a big dive to the outside, then Apollo with a big-ass dive as well. Siaki is lifted up, David Young hitting a spinebuster with an extra step and wins for his team. I give it 2 stars out of 5. It was a fine 6-man match, but not a lot of heat to it, not a lot of story because, Diamonds in the Rough are kind of where they are on the card, and this is a very makeshift team they're going against here. Apollo would not be much longer in TNA. He'd go back to Puerto Rico where he found a lot of his fame. I always wish they did more with Skipper in TNA. You saw like moments of greatness in WCW, and then wow, that iconic moment doing the Hurricane Rana off the top of the cage in 2004. And man, kind of based off that, you'd hope they would kind of build something off of that and make him a bigger star. And for whatever reason, Skipper never seemed to work out, but I always wish they had done something more with him, or that his career went to higher places after that. They go to a replay of what happened at the end of the 4-way match in the pre-show, and the transition covers the move that wins the match. I could not believe that. Also on the pre-show, Raven called out Larry Zbyszko and gave him one more chance to put him in the title match versus Jarrett. You ass-kissing, backbite, tube twisting, and goes to choke him. Rhino shows up and runs down a held-back Raven, asking him what happened. He asks if a girl got into his head, which seems to give Raven pause. There's more of a scuffle, and Rhino hits the gore on Raven's goon, Cassidy Riley. Also worth mentioning that Rhino is going to be in the Monsters Ball match later, which, they say, oh, these guys are going to be locked in solitary confinement for 24 hours before the pay-per-view with no food or water or sunlight and everything. Rhino shows up here, first of all, during the pre-show, not like when the actual pay-per-view begins, and man, he seems okay to me. They cut to a live shot of Shane Douglas and Gail Kim backstage. They are not ready for their hit. Quick, back to the announce team. Then back to Shane with NWA World's Champion Jeff Jarrett and Gail Kim. Jarrett laughs at Nash's misfortunes and says he'll do anything to get out of an ass whooping from the King of the Mountain. He says screw Jeff Hardy, screw Rhino, screw Abyss, screw Sabu, and screw Raven. Suddenly in comes Jarrett ally Monty Brown. He tells Jarrett to say it to his face. Tell him he sucks if he's so confident. Jarrett's like, why would I say that, Monty Brown? You're my friend, calm down. And Brown cuts him off. Jarrett tells him there's a big ticked off Texan out in the ring, and if Brown loses to him, he'll fall down the rankings, and it's a long climb back up. Brown firing off some of his alliterative phrases to describe what he'll do to Lance Hoyt. Jarrett tells him it's playoff time, and Monty can't afford a loss. We go to that matchup now, and for the life of me, I don't really know why these two are fighting, but this is a very similar feeling I had to when Lance Hoyt was in that match with Bobby Roode at Slammiversary. Why are we having it? Who knows? It's Monty Brown versus Lance Hoyt. Early on, Lance goes for his flapjack move, but Monty tries to flip through it like it's a backdrop, so he takes kind of a scary fall there. On the outside, Monty tells the crowd to get out of the way, but he's just teasing, just rusing, but Hoyt takes a big dive over the ropes onto him in response. Some dueling chants from the crowd here, but Hoyt's got all the impact zone on his side as he comes back. He goes up top, but Brown shoves him off to the outside. Back in the ring, Monty with a big fall-away slam, but Lance comes back with the boot. The moonsault, we get a kick out. Monty catching Lance in midair, hits the alpha bomb, more back and forth, and just as Don West says Hoyt has arrived at Impact, Monty hits the pounce, period, nice and clean. Monty wins. 2.5 stars out of 5 for me on this one. Again, I'm not entirely sure why this match is happening. It just seems to be giving Monty Brown something to do, as he is kind of on that bubble of like, will he or won't he turn on Jeff Jarrett? And then you've got Lance Hoyt, who's just kind of like a big man who's good for a good mid-card match. He's got a good fan following at this point, so he's kind of bulletproof in a lot of ways here. Also, I just like, a match where it's just like power move, power move, power move. Like these two guys made it look really good, except for that one, that flapjack spot gone wrong. But besides that, it looked really good. Hoyt showing some spark, showing a little bit of that future murder hawk in there. It's funny to see how much he has grown and changed since 2005. There's a recap of some global impact, then another 6-man tag, you say. Shane Douglas is backstage with the 3 Live crew. Can this family stick together as they take on Team Canada for the 100th time? BG James says they're tighter than pantyhose, 2 sizes too small. Starts to talk about Scott D'Amore when in comes Kip James, the outlaw no more. He offers to have the teams back during the match. BG and Ron Killing seem to agree, but Conan thinks it's a terrible idea and calls Kip a biatch. A biatch! Well, the mouth on him. We go to that matchup next as 3 Live crew take on A1, Bobby Roode, and Eric Young of Team Canada. Beej on the mic saying that they're Americana personified. That fan in the crunk shirt who starts to dance as James does his shtick is everything. Conan's on fire versus all 3 opponents. We get the shoe, we get the triple team. As the match goes on, we see Kip James sitting on the stage. At one point in the match, the fans just start singing the national anthem en masse, kind of like Get It Team Canada, which I like the sentiment, I like the idea of that. But I don't know if it was a coordination thing or a projection thing or what, because I could not even make out the fact they were singing the song until they got to Land of the Free, which is like almost the very end. There's a massive New Age Outlaws chant, the crowd literally begging for it at this point. Truth with the spinning forearm, allowing BG James to get the hot tag and do his little dances, his jabs, his knee drop, it's all there. D'Amore with the distraction on the apron as James hits the pump handle slam, turns around taking a shot from the hockey stick. Young with the cover and the win for Team Canada. After the bell, Kip comes to the ring, pulls BG out of the ring. He grabs a chair, looks like he's going to hit Conan with it, but turns around and attacks Team Canada. Then we get a bit of a face-off there with K-Dog and Kip James asking, hey, do you trust me now? I give it 2 stars out of 5. And, I didn't think this 6-man match was quite as interesting as the other 6-man tag earlier in the show, partly just due to overexposure on the part of 3 Live crew and Team Canada for me, as opposed to, hey, Diamonds in the Rough and Sonny Siaki and Shark Boy. Haven't seen those guys nearly as much. And so I thought, that was a bit more fresh for me. Like I said, Team Canada, 3 Live crew, they feuded a long time. This is another, entry in this rivalry, but I do appreciate the storytelling of Kip James continuing to fight for acceptance into the group. This will eventually lead to the formation of the 4 Live crew, but sadly, that will not last long. Franchise is backstage with Zbyszko. Who's going to wrestle Jeff Jarrett? The living legend is exasperated and hasn't decided yet, but he is waiting for a call from upper management. Our next matchup is the iconic Ultimate X match for the #1 contendership for the X Division title as Petey Williams takes on Chris Sabin and Matt Bentley. Back at Unbreakable, Bentley made his return to TNA after a couple of months off and challenged Williams and Sabin to this matchup at Bound for Glory. By the way, Matt Bentley is no longer Michael Shane like he was at Slammiversary when I reviewed that a couple of weeks ago. Soon after Slammiversary, WWE threatened Shane with legal action because they had a wrestler signed named Mike Shane, who was one half of the Gemini twins, you might recall. And so Mike Shane's name was trademarked, Michael Shane wasn't. And so Matt Bentley decided to change his ring name to his real name, and that's what he went by for the rest of his career. Meanwhile, Mike Shane over in WWE, they never used that name for when he was there. They put over how Chris Sabin has the best Ultimate X record out of any of the other guys, including a match like it in Puerto Rico. Sabin is the first one to hang from the cables, but Bentley catches him and brings him down with a super inverted atomic drop. Tracy with a distraction of all distractions on Williams as Bentley tries to cross the cables. He's cut off but comes down with a big elbow drop. Sabin gets Bentley in the corner, hits a buckle bomb on Williams onto Bentley. Williams doing some amazing maneuvering to hit both Bentley and Sabin. Bentley drops his opponents and all three are down. Bentley and Sabin meet on the cables. They drop and Sabin hits a big-ass powerbomb. Petey gets Sabin trapped in the corner, stands on Chris's crotch while singing "Oh Canada." Sabin is hanging off a cable. Bentley tackles him down. Then the X falls off. Oh no! Sadly, it's not a live ball. They have to hang it back up, so the match just stops. They set a ladder up to hang the X back up. The fans are hating this. They're chanting, "Use the ladder" to get the X, which is actually pretty sound strategy. But they don't do that. The match continues. Sabin and Bentley causing each other to crash and burn. The X falls off again, and this time Petey just catches it and they count it. Williams wins. I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. Not the greatest Ultimate X match by any stretch, but I do got to give those guys credit for the risks they took and the stuff they did in this match, because it was pretty insane. However, that finish was the epitome of LOL TNA. I mean, like, it made it all just kind of look cheap by having that kind of held together by the flimsiest of zip ties. They try to hang it up again, and it falls again. Like, they got to get stronger tape or something. I don't know what that was, because, yeah, that was a pretty bad finish to an otherwise fine matchup here. I mean, that alone took off a half-star in the rating for me on this one. It was so bad they redid it on Impact a few weeks later, and Petey Williams just won that anyway. They show us that house show footage where America's Most Wanted helped Jeff Jarrett win back the world title. Gail Kim joining Jarrett's squad, which also includes Team Canada as satellite members. The baddies beat up and bloodied the newly debuted Team 3D. They held a mock funeral for them, which was pretty hilarious. And on the Impact one night before this show, AMW fought hella dirty to take the tag team titles from the Naturals. And that brings us to this rematch here tonight. Chase Stevens and Andy Douglas are not only beltless here, they are heartless, as Jimmy Hart, their spiritual advisor they had that debuted with them at Slammiversary, he's gone from the company. He left soon after Unbreakable took place. And so, yeah, the Naturals are without a manager right now, but they are full of fighting spirit here as this match kicks off. Begins with a brawl. Chris Harris going right for the bandages of Andy Douglas. James Storm skins the cat to avoid a dropkick, but is powerbombed into the barricade instead, and he's out for a while. Harris is all by himself, getting the heck beat out of him for a long time. Gail Kim with a distraction, allowing Storm to jump Douglas. Douglas busted open once again as AMW put on the pressure. Eye of the Storm will get a kick out. Stevens able to get the tag, makes a big comeback for his team. Gail Kim throwing Harris a little bag of white gimmick. It's kicked into his face and he's blinded, suddenly grabbing his own partner and hits the catatonic. The Naturals hit the death sentence on the team they're stealing it from, but we get a kick out. Setting up for the Natural disaster, but Gail Kim distracts again. Douglas gets his hands on her, but Wildcat suddenly handcuffs Douglas to the barricade. Man, of all the times to not have the mouth of the South. Storm bottles Stevens in the head as Douglas stands there helpless. A death sentence to Stevens, the 3 count, and AMW retain. The champs give Douglas a little extra beating since he can't do anything about it. 3.5 stars out of 5 for me on this one. You know, even though we'd seen this matchup a whole lot of times between these two teams, and even though the outcome was never in doubt given where AMW are on this journey of theirs, having just turned heel to win the belts in the first place, you know, despite all that, this was still a really entertaining matchup, and the Naturals looked like great, valiant, come-from-behind baby faces here. Great underdogs in this one. The way they fought back and ultimately were screwed because, you know, one of them was handcuffed to the barricade and was just literally helpless to save his partner. That's a good story there, and this was a great match. It's time for Monsters Ball 2 Electric Boogaloo as Rhino takes on Sabu, Jeff Hardy, and Abyss with Father James Mitchell, who based on this graphic looks like he's actually in the match for whatever reason. Last month at Unbreakable, Abyss beat Sabu in a no disqualification match, and then this kind of added Rhino and Jeff Hardy onto it to give us this Monsters Ball matchup here. Rhino was kind of in the wind after he lost to Raven at Unbreakable, and Jeff Hardy had recently returned and wasn't really doing anything at the moment, so they just kind of settled into this one. We get Shane Douglas backstage chatting with Sinmin. Father James Mitchell says that spending one whole day without food, water, or light must be tough for the other wrestlers, but Abyss has spent lots of time growing up in those exact same conditions, so he's cool with it, and says inviting Abyss into a Monsters Ball match is akin to inviting a combat veteran with a Purple Heart to a game of paintball. PTSD is what he's talking about, folks. Like I said, the whole story is these men were in solitary confinement for the last 24 hours, which doesn't really play into how they wrestle in this match. They don't seem to act like they're particularly famished or dehydrated. It's kind of hard to present that in a wrestling match, which is probably why they really de-emphasize that part of the story in future iterations of Monsters Ball. Hardy takes to the air early and often, Sabu busting open already from God knows what, and it seems to be a hindrance as the match goes on. Hardy dives onto Abyss amongst the audience members, just a wild brawl with all four guys. Rhino has a chair, swings it a lot, Hardy hitting poetry in motion. He wants Sabu to do it, but psych, kick to the ribs. Rhino's now bleeding as he swings a kendo stick hither and yon. Abyss has a ladder and bludgeons Hardy with it as they make their way to the stage. Abyss setting up some tables, but then Hardy dinks him repeatedly with a chair. Meanwhile, Rhino on another table bridge at the ring, Sabu with a springboard dive right onto him. Jeff goes way up the set to the damn logo, a huge swanton off the set and onto the tables below. And talk about a small margin of error. If he were a few inches short, that would have been it, but holy shit, what a moment here. Back in the ring, Sabu hits the triple jump moonsault on Rhino. Abyss crawling back to the ring. He ends up catching Sabu in the air and throwing him out through another table outside. He brings out those tacks of his, but is gored into another table in the ring. Rhino with his Rhino driver to Jeff Hardy off the second rope. The 3 count and Rhino wins it. 4 stars out of 5 for me. Sometimes a wild-ass car wreck brawl just works, and I think these guys really brought it on this one. My one nitpick with this matchup is I think Abyss, and for that matter Jeff Hardy, recovered way too soon after the giant swanton. Like something of the enormity of a moment like that, which is no doubt like a top 5 or 10 moment, a singular moment in Jeff Hardy's TNA career. For Abyss to be the first one to get up and crawl back, and even for Jeff to come back, I thought that was a little much. Those two should not have been factors into the end of the match after that moment, but be that as it may, it was a wild-ass brawl, and it was very entertaining. We have an update. Who will face Jeff Jarrett for the title tonight? Zbyszko says there will be a 10-man over-the-top rope gauntlet match. Jarrett comes in as Douglas protests on the champ's behalf. Jarrett saying it's a screw job by TNA management. Zbyszko telling him to kick rocks, which makes all the sense in the world because Jarrett has every advantage going into this thing. He's going to be fresh. He's going to be, the champion's advantage. He's got his whole squad with him and everything. Whoever wins here's got no advantage, so what's he complaining about? For the X Division Championship, it's a 30-minute Iron Man match as AJ Styles defends against Christopher Daniels. At Unbreakable, Styles won that iconic triple threat involving Samoa Joe to win the X Division title, snapping Daniels' 6-month reign with it, and Daniels wants it back. They make a big point of the fact the last time these two fought in an Iron Man match, it went into overtime because AJ withstood the Akoji clutch as regulation expired, and so that is definitely a seed they're planting for later in this match. Starts out with a lot of back and forth. AJ takes Daniels to the outside, hits a huge dive over the barricade onto him. Styles working over Daniels for a while as the first 10 minutes of this match pass. AJ goes up top, Daniels catches him and hits a suplex, starts to work the head and neck area, and now it's his time to work over his opponent for a while. The Koji clutch is applied, the same move Styles withstood last time. Somehow AJ powers through and gets those ropes. At the 15-minute mark, AJ with a beautiful springboard moonsault DDT. I love this sort of half straight jacket throw from the top rope by Daniels. Daniels with the BME at about 19 minutes in, but somehow AJ kicks out. With 9 minutes left, Daniels with a knee lift to Styles, who takes a nasty fall to the outside. Big dive by the challenger. Back in the ring, AJ with the Pele, a big old dive of his own. Daniels with a back suplex off the apron and onto the floor. Good lord. The action's back into the ring, both men giving it their all, trading roll-up attempts. We are scoreless as we hit the 2-minute warning. More back and forth. Finally, AJ counters out of the Angel's wings and hits the Styles Clash. 3 count with about 1 second to go. Styles wins and retains. I also give this match 4 stars out of 5. It is the polar opposite to the Monsters Ball match before it in every conceivable way. But that being said, it's still also a wildly entertaining matchup here. I mean, this is just, like I said, it's the total contrast. You had the big brawling on the weapons in the last match. This one is just straight up wrestling and high flying, and I think these two do a really good job. I think that the last 5-10 minutes especially, where they're really showing the exhaustion and the fatigue, are some of the best parts of this match come in those last 10 minutes. But the half hour, I think, really flew by here. And again, just showing you why these two are so just instrumental to the success of TNA during this time. It's time now for that 10-man over-the-top rope gauntlet match to see who will face Jeff Jarrett immediately afterward for the NWA title. Your first two guys in this matchup here are Samoa Joe and Ron Killings. And so the rules are, it starts off with like
these two guys,
and then like 2 minutes pass, then somebody else comes in, and then every other minute, that's when the new entries come in. It kind of seems like a combination of like the Casino Gauntlet match that AEW does today and the Royal Rumble in terms of timed entries and over-the-top eliminations. Killing starts out by mocking the Polynesian dancing Joe did earlier in the night. After 2 minutes, Sabu arrives looking a little worse for wear. He's still bleeding through his bandages, still hits the triple jump moonsault. Lance Hoyt is the next entrant, then Abyss 1 minute later. We get a stare down with he and Joe, which the crowd really is excited about. In comes Jeff Hardy, who is barely able to walk to the ring. Up next, Monty Brown. He pounces Boo, catches Hardy and dumps him out, pauses, then leaps over the top rope, and both men are out. Oh, that could have been a bit smoother. Now Rhino is in, and all four members of Monsters Ball have limped their way into this gauntlet match. Rhino takes out Hoyt. Kip James enters next as Sabu is eliminated. Also, I thought the gauntlet match was supposed to feature guys who did wrestle before in the night. Kip James did not do that. Then the final entrant, the announce team thinks it'll be Raven, but it's AJ Styles. God, is TNA trying to kill someone tonight? James is thrown out and once again tries to show some selflessness toward the 3 Live crew before Truth is ultimately thrown out. Abyss dumps Joe and Styles out at the same time. Rhino throws Abyss out last to win the gauntlet match. He's going to get that world title match against Jeff Jarrett right now, but first I'm going to give that gauntlet match a star and a half. Oh, and by the way, here's your special guest referee, back once again after appearing at Hard Justice, Tito Ortiz. Jeff Jarrett brings out a casket, which he said at the top of the show tonight someone would go into by the end of the evening. And man, if you're going for symbolism, why not just bring back the fat lady to sing like you were going to do for Hogan at Bash at the Beach 2000? Double J all over Rhino to start things off, who's already been through 2 grueling matches, beating him at the announce table. He goes up top once, hits a top rope tackle. Goes up top again, hits another one. I wonder what he'll do next. Sure enough, Jarrett goes up top a 3rd time, gets goozled, then hit with a trip to Dick Kick City. Honestly though, like, who else watched this match thinking that Rhino was going to gore him in midair on the 3rd one? That would have been rad. Gail Kim has arrived. She goes up to the top rope, but Tito Ortiz catches her and physically removes her from the ring. Meanwhile, Jarrett El Kabongs Rhino. I'm not entirely sure it would have mattered if Ortiz saw that one, considering I'm pretty sure he saw when Rhino kicked Jarrett in the dick. A very close call on the 2 count. Sounds like Tito hit the 3. In comes AMW, who bring another guitar. Ortiz decks them both as Rhino hits a gore. The cover, the win. Rhino is the new NWA champion. And after the bell, Jarrett and the rest of his gang beat on Rhino. 3 Live crew show up to make the save. In comes Team Canada for the numbers game. They stuff Rhino into the casket and shut it. Jarrett stands atop. Then suddenly we get Team 3D's music. Brother Ray and Brother Devon, who are not legally allowed to use their old names because Paul Heyman lied to them and said that they had the trademark when in fact WWE did. Them's the breaks, guys. Anyway, they help beat up the heels. We get a 3D to Eric Young, who goes into the casket. Also, I just noticed that Brother Ray is still wearing WWE merch there. Rhino stands tall with the belt as we fade to black. I also give this match 1.5 stars. You know, not much of a match given what had happened with Rhino leading up to it, but man, what a heck of a story and what an audible that was called here. You know, the old adage in wrestling is that if you got to change something in a big match, then the replacement has to excel what you were doing originally so the fans don't go home unhappy. And I think that Rhino winning the belt here was a great audible in that sense. Kevin Nash was probably not going to win the belt on this night, and in any other circumstance, Rhino probably wasn't going to either. But the fact they were able to recover and tell you this story of Rhino, you know, coming through all these odds and everything to win the belt at the end, I think was very well done. You know, Rhino would not hold the belt very long. I think only recognized for 2 days before dropping it back to Jarrett. Again, showing you that there was never any plan for Rhino to get it. But ultimately, him getting that due was very similar to how I felt about Raven winning it a few months earlier, where it's like, man, somebody who was never going to get that credit and never going to get that chance to be a world champion, like when he went to WWF, for instance. And like he was the last original ECW champion. And I remember seeing Rhino for the first time in ECW, like it blew my mind. He was an anomaly to me. I'm like, holy shit, this guy is built like unlike anything I've ever seen before. Like, who is this madman? The stuff he was doing in ECW. So that made me kind of a fan of his for a very long time. And him coming to TNA and getting kind of that career renaissance there, becoming the world champion, albeit briefly, still a really cool moment. And again, when one half of your main event goes down with a medical scare or whatever, you got to change things up. This is a really smart way to do it. My grade for TNA Bound for Glory 2005 is a B+. Another very strong showing for TNA in a year with a lot of strong pay-per-views. I mean, between this and Unbreakable and Slammiversary alone, it's just been, yeah, a lot of bangers, so to speak, in this year for TNA. Just a great balance of like the hardcore brawling, the high flying, and just the solid wrestling. You get a little bit of everything on this show. A lot of cool moments and yeah, just very entertaining matches. And again, for considering they had to blow up some of their creative because of the main event being changed, I think it was a good recovery. My one nitpick with this show, the more I think about it though, is like, was the Gauntlet match really necessary? Because I feel that you could just say, oh, Monsters Ball match, is the winner of this is going to face Jeff Jarrett, and you could have moved Monsters Ball right before that main event matchup there. And you know, I get putting Rhino through more strife, like on the way to, you know, getting the world title at the end, but you could have also not had that Gauntlet match and given some other matches time, especially others that could have used the extra time. Samoa Joe, Jushin Liger, for instance. Like I said, it's not like the end of the world that they did that Gauntlet match. It's crazy to think like some of the stuff that those participants did earlier, and like, oh yeah, you're gonna wrestle like a Rumble later on, by the way. But you know, like I said, it's a nitpick. Overall, very strong show. But what did you think of Bound for Glory 05? How about this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to Wrestling with Regret. Hit that bell icon for all the notifications. And of course, don't forget to go to ProWrestlingTees.com for all my wonderful t-shirts. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.